Okay, good morning everyone, and can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Development Control Committee A at Mid-Suffolk District Council. Just need to run through some of the domestic arrangements before we get going. Can you please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use? Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you will be asked to leave. Can I just ask everyone to make sure your mobile phones are on silent, please, or switched off? And could you also just check the laptops that the volume is right down to avoid the pingings that come in when emails come in? We will be using e-voting today, as we always do at Mid-Suffolk planning meetings, on the modern.gov.app. So please could members make sure they're logged in and ready to use the app, and I see everyone has registered attendance, so thank you. If I can remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you're making a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. If we do hear the fire alarm today, please leave the building via the fire exit, make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Club. If you can follow the signs directing you to the fire exits at the end of each floor, and please do not enter the atrium, the ground floor area and walkways. If you are in the atrium at the time of the alarm, please follow the signs to the nearest fire exit signs. Please use stairs and do not use the lift. And do not re-enter the building till it's safe it is to do so. Right, just to run through, well, we haven't got any members of the public here, but just for the benefit of anyone that might be watching online, we have on my left, the members of the committee will be making decisions with myself on the applications before us today. In Mid-Suffolk District Council, the ward member may speak but may not vote. And then on the right-hand side, we have the officers that will be presenting. We have Gemma Walker, the Area Planning Officer, Jasmine Wyard, the Case Officer, Ian Deprez, the Legal Advisor, and Claire and Mandy on my right and left, who make sure everything ticks over smoothly. And I think that's it. So thanks, everyone. We'll now move straight on to the agenda. Apologies for absence and substitutions. Do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Barry Humphreys.
Thanks very much. Do we need to receive any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members? Councillor Mayor, then Councillor Manson.
Yes, the agent, Mr. Rob Bailey, lives within my ward and we are acquainted.
Thank you. And Councillor Manson.
I'm the event director for the Park Run, which uses the path within this site as part of its route.
Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you for that. So it's...
I suppose I should say that I've been to the site.
No, well, we'll come on to any site visits. Okay, so that's just two non-pecuniary interests, really. Thank you. Declarations of lobbying. Any declarations of lobbying? None received? No, thank you. Declarations of personal site visits. Councillor Matheson, I think you want to come in on that.
Yes, I've been there many times.
Thank you. And Councillor Manson.
I'm usually in that vicinity at least twice a week, not specifically to look at the planning application, but on the site.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on now to the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 6th of September 22. They run in our papers from page 7 through to 18. Is everyone happy that I sign those as a true record of the meeting? Is that, oh, we have to, sorry, I always do this. Sorry, we have to go to the app to vote on if we accept the minutes. Can I have a proposer for the minutes, please? Councillor Mayor, and a seconder. Councillor Field, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress in your app. Thank you, Chair. That's 6 votes for and 1 abstention. That's carried.
Okay, thank you very much. We now need to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Are any received?
None received.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we move on to the schedule of planning applications. We've got one application before us today, which is DC 2106052 Northfield View, Phase 2C, land to the west of Chiltern Field in Stowmarket. I now hand over to the case officer, Jasmine Wire, to introduce the application to committee. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. I'm presenting a reserve matters application for Phase 2C of the Northfield View development today. This phase comprises of 234 dwellings. The reserve matters for consideration are appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. The principle of development was established and the access and spine road were approved under the outline and associated infrastructure permissions. These dwellings notably do contribute to the Council's housing land supply. Members are reminded that this presentation should be viewed in conjunction with the committee report, and it does not seek to replace any of the content within that. So here is the whole of the Northfield View development in context. As you can see, Chiltern Fields is located to the west-hand side. You've then got agricultural land and the A14 to the north. One house is to the west and Stowmarket is to the east. Northfield View is outlined in red, and as you can see, some of the dwellings have been delivered with a lot more under construction in that northern area of the site. The spine road has been constructed in full, which of course guides the overall layout of this phase. Phase 2C falls south of the roundabout, roughly in the centre of the screen there, and in the centre of the development. Phase 2C is the central area outlined in red, all south of the central roundabout, as you can see again. Phase 2B is the area to the northern boundary of the site, which has been approved previously. Phase 2D will then follow to the south, which is that area in blue. Over the next 3 slides, you'll see the different areas of the Northfield View development. There are a scattering of listed buildings shown in the orange. Public rights of way is shown dashed in green. The built-up area boundary of Stowmarket is shown by the brown line, and green areas will show protected trees. This slide shows the most northern half of the development, which has been partially built out and shows part of what will be Phase 2B, which was the one previously approved. So this is the centre of the development, with the majority of land forming part of Phase 2C, with the northern area of the map then forming part of Phase 2B. As you can see, you've got some protected trees and public rights of way running through this area. Finally, this is the southern area of the development, which again shows the southern half of Phase 2C and the land that will be coming forward as part of Phase 2D. Within that southern central gap outside of the development area is Paupers Graves. As reflected in the tabled papers, which hopefully members will have had a chance to read, there are some updates to be made to the committee report. So highways, landscaping and ecology matters have all been resolved. There are likely to be some ecological conditions which are likely to be imposed as part of the recommendation. However, we've not been advised of the specific recommended conditions as of yet from Place Services, but that's pending. Here is the site layout plan. It is a higher density part of the site and its layout and scale reflects this. As shown earlier, the spine road is already in place and the developable parcels are heavily guided by that spine road. Public open space is still proposed, totalling 1.7 hectares. There are a range of housing sizes scattered around the site, with the development proposing a range of 2-bedroom to 5-bedroom dwellings. The larger dwellings, as you can see, are primarily located on the edge of the development there, but there are some scattered within. A total of 47 affordable dwellings are proposed, all of which would be tenure blind, utilising the same mix of materials and architectural features as all the other dwellings. The affordable dwellings would also be clustered and integrated alongside the open market housing. They would comprise of a mixture of affordable rent, shared ownership and discount market, and would be delivered in accordance with the Section 106 agreement that was signed as part of the outline permission. A total of 581 parking spaces are proposed, including 58 visitor spaces and 2 unallocated spaces. There are 7 instances of triple parking where it is truly required as per Suffolk County Council's parking guidance, all of which are located down private drives, sort of to the outer edges and near to the visitor parking. In terms of the storey heights, the garages are single storey, dwellings are 2 to 2.5 storeys, and flats are 3 storeys. The site is highly permeable, responding to the existing public rights of way, with a range of 2-metre wide footpaths shown in the orange, and the 3-metre wide shared foot and cycleways shown in yellow running in and around the site. The connections to the south show how Phase 2C will eventually feed into Phase 2D. There are a range of boundary treatments proposed around the site with brick walls, metal railings and low-level post and rail fencing in and around prominent and visible locations and corners. All close bordered fencing is concentrated within the rear areas of the plots in less visible locations. There are 6 character areas proposed to help aid legibility around the site, with house types to reflect these different areas. Within the street scene, there'll be a variety of materials, landscaping, architectural features and boundary treatments offered by the combination of house types and character areas, which again aids legibility and wayfinding around the site. Here we have a selection of the house types. The 2 on the left show 3-bedroom homes and the 2 on the right show 4-bedroom homes. Here we have some further elevations and floor plans. So the left image shows a 5-bedroom house type and the right shows a block of the apartments, all of which would offer 2 bedrooms. The recommendation is therefore to approve reserve matters. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Questions? I've got a few, but we'll go around the room first. We'll start at this end and work around. Councillor Mayor first.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. Page 74, there's a statement that plot 121 doesn't appear to have any private outdoor amenity space. Was that a mistake? Was that being resolved?
Is that in the highway section? Sorry, which point is that?
74. Base services.
Yes, that has been resolved as part of the amended plan. So the most up-to-date consultation response that we had through was from Place Services Landscaping as per the tabled papers. So they've reviewed amended plans, which that's all been resolved.
It's just very difficult to read numbers on things you can't expand on
yes,
screen.
yeah, no, that's absolutely fine.
Thank you.
We'll go around the room. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. Could I 2 clarifications, please? On page 24 at the bottom, it says NHS England are saying that they would use SIL to fund any future additional services, but obviously there's no SIL from this site. So are NHS England aware that they wouldn't get SIL from this site if they need to improve services? Thanks.
Yes, they should be. I'm not sure if, Gemma, because you've dealt with some earlier phases.
Yeah, so although there wouldn't be SIL specifically from this site, because any contributions would have been dealt with under the outline, we wouldn't be looking at that at reserve matters in any case. But if they still needed money through SIL, obviously it comes in through a wider funding pot in any case, so there would still flexibility through the SIL process.
Thanks. And also on the housing, could you just clarify, please, the issue about 1-bed properties? From strategic housing, it says that they're across the whole of the development, or the A, B, C and D, there should be a certain percentage of 1-bed properties, and it implies that there'll have to then be a lot more 1-bed properties in the following phase. Could you just clarify that? Because I'm not clear that that would either happen or that we should be asking for them here, or why they weren't here? Thank you.
Yes, so in effect, there would be a high proportion of one-beds in that final phase. That has been explained to the applicant and agent, and that is acknowledged. Obviously, we are where we are, but the Section 106 does require a certain amount, so they will be delivered, and it will have to be incorporated into that final phase.
Thanks. Councillor Mansell.
I too was going to ask about the housing mix. Can you just explain what the amended plan for this issue with the junction at the parking places of plot 73 to 233 is?
Yes, yeah. So in effect, I think there was a slight miscommunication about what was actually required from Suffolk County Council. So there was a junction type access which would have given motorists priority over pedestrians, which was originally proposed. Following some further discussions, an amended plan has altered that junction, so it serves a parking court. But effectively what would happen is there's a different junction type now, which is effectively a dropped curb, which enables pedestrians to have priority over vehicles.
Councillor Field.
Thank you. A couple of points. One, it mentions in the report somewhere the fabric first approach to building, to the performance of buildings. I wondered which version of the building regulations will apply. Is that the ones when the outline was agreed? Is it the one that exists today, or the one that will exist in whenever it is, June or July or whatever?
So effectively, building regulations will apply at the point that they come to build. Obviously, building regulations are not planning matters, so we can't really go into further detail on that. But in terms of the building regs, it will be whatever has come into play when they're building it.
At the point they're actually laying bricks or digging foundations. Okay. Second point, really. Just the, I looked for the 106, I couldn't find it online anywhere, I don't know whether it is. Was concerned about the sort of requirements on the establishment and maintenance of the open space, which is quite appreciable of that. I wonder what provisions have been made for that.
I believe it would have been within the Section 106. I'm not entirely sure where it would be available online, but it certainly is within the public domain. And I believe, I don't know if Gemma's aware, I'm sure that there would have been something in there that related to the open space management.
I thought there was. Taylor MP might be able to answer quicker than we can, so perhaps we'll come back to that. I will just have a check and make sure, and we'll double check it goes on the system if it's not there, and check for that answer as well, if that's okay.
Thank you, yes. Okay, that's it.
Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, yes. Slide 8, I think really, in terms of, if that's showing the constraints, I think it should also be showing the visually important open space of paupers' graves, which is, although it's not abutting to B, C, whatever we're on now, C, it does actually, it is on the edge of phase 2D. So I think we should be recognising that it's there on that. If you've got that slide handy, 8. I would wish members to be clear of its existence and importance. No, difficult. Thank you. Yeah, can I give prior notice of the next questions on slide 15? But on this one, it's that rectangle. Yeah, that's broadly, that is it. That is the Paupers Graves VIOS, which is very heavily wooded, and indeed owned and maintained by the Wanners Parish Council. Thanks for that one. So on slide 15, what I wanted you to just winkle out and be clear about was on the connections, wait for it. Yeah, right, yes, so yeah, it was a bit of a quick visit to this. I think the key point that I wanted to understand and see on there is this bus gate, which is in the extreme bottom left-hand corner. I think southwest for Sarah. Yeah, so that is a road going to there capable of taking buses. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, and a bus gate has been quite extensively discussed with Suffolk County Council and the agent and applicant during the process of this application, just to make sure that everything is in place if that bus service is eventually delivered, which I think is part of the outline. There's a condition or something in the section 106 which relates to it.
Yeah.
But all of the roads within the site, as in the Spine Road, would be, well, they're 6 metres wide, so they're able to accommodate buses.
Right, yeah, and also on that, the threshold of 300 for providing that, or making it open, is that, because that bus gate goes right back to the outline of allocation of the whole site and everything. Which 300 houses is that dependent upon triggering? Because, I mean, there's more than 300 up there already overall.
Yes, I think I would defer that to the applicant, who may be slightly more aware of the specific trigger point, but notably there is an element further along from the site which didn't relate to the overall outline. It was previous to that. So you've only got phase 2A that has basically been built out, and then phase 2B is the one that's been approved. So once, whatever the trigger point is, that's at the point that it will be delivered. But there probably are 300 houses overall, but not within, as part of this outline.
I don't think that makes it remotely clear which 300 it is.
The allocation's 750 originally, but
Something
this
like that,
part
yeah.
of Chiltern Leeds is for 600 was what the outline was for. So I think Jasmine's saying out of the original allocation you've got to take off a certain number that we've dealt with previously, and then the bus gate would be based on this 600, so about halfway through the totality of this site. But again, perhaps Taylor may well have a
I was
detail
hoping.
of
I'm hoping that the council rather than the applicant is in control of the situation, please.
Yes, but I meant in terms of their build-out planning. So they will obviously have a plan for the numbers of build-out and the time over which that will take, so they would know when it is going to be hitting that target. But we can come back to that.
I'd like to be independently able to monitor when it is.
Would it be useful if I just go back a second to, I've got a slide which kind of shows what has been built out. That might be useful. So as you can see here, there's a range of houses kind of along this bit here, which is outside of that Northfield view, as in what relates to this reserve matters and the outline. So this is the whole outline area. As you can see, you've got phase 2A that is, obviously there is some level of build out here. You've then got phase 2B, which hasn't yet been, I mean, they may well have started construction, but it certainly hasn't been built out. And then obviously phase 2C is this bit here. So at the point that they hit 300 within this red line, that will be, if that is the trigger point, that will be the point that the bus will have to be provided.
So it's within the whole of phase 2, is what you're saying?
Yes, yeah, I spoke, yeah.
Because obviously not outside that red line, we've got phase 1.
Yes, yeah.
Right. Okay. 300 within phase. That's.
John, you want to come back on that point?
I was just going to make the point, shouldn't this be in the 106 agreement, which is one of the reasons I did question before that it wasn't available?
May. I think I have found this online. This is the one relating to the outline permission for application 500716 with Taylor. You've got it as well, Jasmine. Have we both got it then?
Yeah, I think you're probably,
Yeah, I've got it here. It's complete between the council and Taylor. Sorry, I'm so sorry, Chairman. I've got the computer away the microphone. A terrible mistake to make. This is the one between the council and Taylor Wimpey, dated 5th of July 2018. It's quite obviously, as you'd expect, it's quite long and complex. So I'm sorry, Councillor Field. Gemma has it as well.
I was just going to say,
so
do you
I'll
want to
let
have a quick look for the bus gate
Yeah.
one? Where I'd come up with just the NHS query, so we had an NHS capital contribution through the 106. So I found that, so that will have been done per dwelling. And then the public open space has got a management and maintenance requirement through the 106 as well. So hopefully that's some of the previous points, but we'll have a look for the bus gate.
We'll come back to
and
bus
come back.
gate.
Thank
We'll
you.
look that up. Okay. Councillor Passmore, over to you.
Thanks, Matthew. Just a couple of points. I just wanted to check. I think it was the Parish Council of One House asked for, it's on page 24, early planting on the west. Now that's fine, but clearly we need to use common sense here. You wouldn't want to start doing it in the middle of July. You'd want to do it in the autumn. I don't know when they're going to start the building work, but it does need to be done. I also want to be absolutely sure that if it's in the 106 agreement, that looking after the landscaping scheme till it is well established, sustainable, native species and so on. I'm just imagining that's all in there. And the other comment I'd just like to, or issue to raise, and I often raise this, in a large estate like this, can we make sure that there is much permeability in the driveways and so on as possible?
Can I say we'll come back to that point?
Well, I'm just asking.
Is that what is in there already?
Is that there? Just wanted to be clarified that. And can I also ask, when it comes to the ecological report and so on, is there provision for things like swift boxes and house marking cups, etc.? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of your first point in relation to the landscaping, there is a condition proposed as part of this reserve matters which will basically require the landscaping to be implemented as approved at kind of the earliest point that it can be, obviously within the relevant planting seasons. Then in terms of the permeable surfaces, obviously Suffolk County Council have reviewed all of the surfaces and the specific materials, and they're happy that there isn't any sort of issue in terms of the permeability of them.
What I'm trying to get at, we live in one of the driest parts of the country, and I bring this up at other meetings. What we don't want, or I don't want, personally, personal view, is that we have a lot of hard impermeable surfaces on the driveway so that the water percolates through, as far as possible, not being draconian about it, into the aquifer. That's all I'm asking, and there are all sorts of ways you can do that.
Yeah, that might be, I mean, the specific technical details, it might be worth asking that of the applicant and agent. Thank you. And the ecological bits, yes. I believe that we have a lot of those bits and pieces. I don't think it was specifically mentioned as part of the application, but it's certainly something that we can include as part of the sustainability measures, and I'm assuming, but place services normally require biodiversity enhancement measures. So again, that will kind of be, I suppose, covered by that.
Can I ask several questions? So electric car charging points, is there one at every property?
There isn't one at every property, and part of the reason for that will be because there are parking courts, so it does make it quite difficult to have the EV charging points for each property. There is an EV charging condition as recommended by Suffolk County Council Highways, so notwithstanding the submitted plans, they will have to submit further specific details, and obviously we can try and maximise the amount that they've kind of proposed.
So what percentage, what properties, how many don't have it? I mean, is it 50%, 70%?
So there's 98 of the 234 that do have EV charging, so I'm not sure what that is expressed as a percentage, but so yeah, I mean, obviously it's something that we can review as part of the proposed condition anyway. It might be that you want to ask further sort of...
I can ask the applicant, yeah. Thanks for that. And can I ask how the properties are heated?
Yes, they are heated by gas boilers.
So gas runs out in 2030. What happens after that point?
This is something, you know, we can't assess things on the basis of something happening in the future. We have to assess them at the present time. At the present time, gas is not prohibited, so it's effectively
We'll raise
falls
that
to
with the applicant.
building
Okay.
regs. Yeah.
I mean, we get this on every application. Solar panels, I couldn't see one on any of the drawings. Are there any on any of the properties?
There aren't any on any of the properties as proposed within the submitted plans. However, we have discussed it with the applicant, and they are willing to, they've kind of identified that they're willing to include some PV panels. So again, the specific amount, you know, we can discuss as part of a condition. That might be something we need to add into the recommendation is a proposed condition.
So some is very, could be two, or is it 234?
Specific amount, I don't think it will be 234, but it's something that, again, I would ask the applicant. Okay. Thank you.
Triple parking, how many properties have triple parking?
So there's 7 triple parking spaces that
Could
are
you
required
show them
by
to
the...
us?
Yeah, of course. Right. Right, so most of the, well, all of the triple parking that is proposed that is a requirement as per Suffolk County Council is along these sort of areas. So you can see there's 2 and then a garage space. And these are all the private driveways. Can you see my mouse? I don't know if it's that clear, but... Well, thank you. Right, there we go. So, yeah, you can see there's a couple here. There's some further ones down here. I think they're along this side as well. So they are the kind of outer edge ones serving the slightly larger properties. Obviously, you can then see that there are the orange visitor spaces as well, quite in close proximity to where you've got this kind of triple parking. There are some other instances where it is happening, so you can kind of see along some areas here. This is actually surplus to the requirement, so they only, in accordance with Suffolk County Council's parking guidance, these plots would only actually need 2 parking spaces, which they have provided, and then the garage is surplus to that requirement.
Sorry, if I can come back with another question now that we're talking about parking. Can you tell us what the housing density of this particular phase 2C is in comparison with the site as a whole and of 2A and 2B? Because looking at the plan, there do seem to be an awful lot of parking courts, and I'm just wondering whether they've crammed a lot of houses in, because we know how people behave with parking courts, and they'll all park right outside their front door on the road, so I'm a bit worried about the amount of housing we've actually crammed into this particular phase. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So as part of the overall scheme, this was always kind of envisaged to be the area that had the higher density. I believe 2B, I'm not sure on 2A, I would have to probably go and find that and come back to you on that, but 2B, I believe, I had just found it. Sorry, bear with me just a second. So in phase 2B, which was for 100 dwellings, it was 24.2 dwellings per hectare. I believe this one is now at 33 dwellings per hectare.
And what is the, you know, on the outline when they came for the, whatever it was, Gemma said 700 and 600 and something houses on the whole of phase 2, what is the average density with that? give?
That wouldn't have been set as part of the outline, and I'm not sure if there was any indicative...
There was a number of houses divided by the area will give us the dwellings per hectare.
Yes, I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. I probably would have to go away and work that out, but I can try and do that.
Okay, do we have the bus gate answer?
I'm still looking. I don't know if Ian found anything on the bus gate.
Okay, we'll leave it, we'll keep going. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yeah, yes. The other thing I just wanted to clarify and reassure, page 35, there's a couple of references to the Stowmarket Area Action and SAAB, 6.8.2. It lists various policies with which this application accords. I just thought I'd better ask, are there any policies in the SAAP that this does not accord with?
I don't believe so, because a lot of it related to the original outline, because obviously it was part of an allocation.
Yes.
So a lot of those guided the overall, I suppose, guiding principles of the development, and again, a lot of them were dealt with as part of the outline. So yeah, I don't believe that there are any that it doesn't accord with.
Any conflicts?
Okay, any other questions before we move on? We will come back to the points raised as soon as we get the answers, and the applicant may be able to answer some of those, so we'll move on. So, sorry, John, you want a quick question? Yeah.
Just a quick one. Returning to the bus gate, for an instance, I know these can be quite difficult to get right. I know Councillor Passmore has one in his area that is notorious for allowing cars and vans and God knows what through as well. Some assurance that this one has, that Suffolk County Council has improved the design, so this will achieve its function, which is to let buses through, but not everybody else who fancies using that.
Yes, thank you. So I believe, well, we did have quite a few discussions about this specific point, both the applicant agent and Suffolk County Council Highways, and there was kind of a toing and froing just to get this specific point right. I believe as a result of that, some of the visitor parking was moved as well to kind of discourage cars being in that specific location. But yeah, that has been a kind of central consideration of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Chairman, if
yes.
May I be reminded of Councillor Field's precise question on the woes?
Maintenance. Sorry, I was talking about the maintenance of the open spaces and the construction, and whether that was included in 106, and whether there were sums of money assigned for that, or whether basically they're concerned about the maintenance and the probability that that could eventually fall upon the residents in the area in an unfair way.
Well, I have got it in front of me, the list of planning obligations relevant to the district council as opposed to the county. As you'd expect, a long list. So owner's obligation to the district council, affordable housing, which we haven't been talking about this morning in detail, and then moving down the list, NHS capital contribution, public open space. There's, as is usual and standard, there's a requirement for a scheme, which I'm sure has been in, and play areas. Adoption, provisions for adoption of the land by an appropriate person, transfer of it for a nominal consideration, all the usual sort of thing you would expect. I can't immediately see, I suppose it depends on what the scheme is in these matters. That there's a standard requirement where you have an outline permission to have an open space scheme, which would be come with reserved matters. But again, I think we may have to speak to the applicant about that. Then there's a reference to sports pavilion land, if that's of any interest.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm more than happy, I'm sure the applicant can help us out, but I would just say that we are looking at the reserved matters, which doesn't include the access. We are looking at the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale on this case.
Well, let's bring it up to the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So we'll now move on. We don't have the town council, or obviously parish council. We don't have an objector. We don't have a supporter, but we do have the agent and the applicant. So we have Andrew Wright, the applicant, and James Bailey, the agent. So over to you. You have 3 minutes whenever you're ready, and we do ask you to keep to the 3 minutes, and we have a timer here. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, members. My name is James Bailey, and I'm the planning consultant that has been working alongside Taylor Wimpey on their Northfield View site for a number of years now. I'm joined this morning by Andrew Wright, who is the Senior Technical Manager for Design and Planning at Taylor Wimpey's East Anglia region, and between us, we should be able to answer any of the questions that you may have this morning. We're here to discuss a further connecting phase of the Northfield View development at Stowmarket, which continues to be a highly successful and popular site for Taylor Wimpey in the region. The existing road and infrastructure already in place on site continues to guide how these phases are being brought forward. This is a reserved matters application referred to as Phase 2C, which will link between the housing in Phase 2B to the north and with the future Phase 2D to the south. Consent is being sought for 234 new dwellings, which will include 20% affordable housing units as required as part of the Section 106 agreement. The houses to be constructed are similar to those on the previous phases of development, as are the materials to be used, with the aim of achieving a consistent approach across the whole development. The master plan for Northfield View has been commended for its connections and permeability, with a strong network of footpaths, bridleways and cycle connections being implemented across the whole development. This phase continues to create legible frameworks of new landscaping, open spaces and green corridors, which provides an attractive setting for the new homes, as well as providing new areas of habitat for wildlife. The submission of this application follows extensive pre-app discussions with officers to agree the details of the scheme. As with the previous phases, Taylor Wimpey have continued to carry out a comprehensive public engagement exercise prior to submitting this application and have discussed this phase with Stowmarket Town Council, as well as the parishes of Onehouse and Hawley. No objections have been raised by any of the stakeholders. This application has been carefully made in accordance with the Stowmarket Area Action Plan, the adopted development brief for Chiltern Lees, emerging policy documents, and all of the previous planning consents. The principle of development is now well established some years ago, and the Northfield View site features heavily within the Council's strong housing land supply position. Approval of this application today will enable Taylor Wimpey to continue to deliver houses on this popular and strategically important site, and I would therefore respectfully request that members endorse their officer's recommendation and approve this application this morning. Thank you very much for your time, and we are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm sure we have got questions, so we'll start off at the same go-round as we did before. Councillor Mayor first.
Thank you. 98 charging points. Do you have any idea, what are the criteria for whether a house has a charging point? Is it all the 4 and 5 bedroom houses, or is it all the 1 bedroom houses?
Morning, Chair, morning, members. I think the decisions we've made regarding the EV charging at the moment is based on what we can do in terms of the building regulatory requirements. So there's no existing policy for EV, but as a developer, we're looking at ways of assuming what our customers will want in the future. So at the moment, the EV provision shown before you today is based on us pushing the envelope as far as we can. The biggest restriction that we've got in place is the rear carport, where they then become remote, and actually having cable runs across third-party land becomes a big constraint upon us. So to answer your question, it's based on wherever you've got on-plot parking. It's not specific to a larger property, for example. It's wherever we have the opportunity, we've looked to do so.
Thank you. Can I just follow up that point? So why can't you just bury the cable and have a pop-up at each parking court like others do?
It is possible to do that. It does just create a lot of issues with crossing third-party land. So if you look at the forthcoming building regulations coming into play in 2023, they actually steer people away from that due to those complexities. It's really a case of if there is an issue with your EV charging at home and you need to rip up that cable at some point, it may well be crossing an adoptable highway, some form of public open space, etc., it creates additional problems. It becomes sort of, there's integrated legal matters with that. So we're encouraged by building regulations to steer away from that. However, the flip side of that is to maximise where you can, and you've got the opportunity to do so.
Go around the top.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, if I may. Firstly, PV on roofs. Just can you advise why you're not doing this? There's a developer kind of about 200 metres away on other sites putting PV on all the roofs on one of their developments. So I'd just like to know why you're not using a similar approach for your site. And my second question is with regards to the nationally described space standard. 51% of the affordable housing does not meet the nationally described space standard on this site, and I just want to know why that is. Thank you.
On this development with, I'll answer your second part first, if I may. So regarding the NDSS, it's fair to say that not all of our homes on this development are compliant with those larger increased space standards. For us at the time when this application was considered under the outline, those standards were not part of that consideration. So in terms of the unit numbers and housing delivery, everything was based upon what you've got before you today. Things have moved forward and NDSS has become more and more relevant. So where we've been able to do so, we've tried to maximise the percentage of those homes that can, and as I believe you suggested, in excess of 50% of the homes do comply with that. Regarding the provision of PV, that really is a very open question, very reasonable to ask. As part of our SAP assessment, so the standard assessment procedure, when we look at our homes in terms of the fabric performance of those, we do consider a number of technologies, including the renewables such as photovoltaics. To date, historically, we've not gone down the route of adding PV. Instead, we've gone for a fabric-first approach, whereby we've insulated the homes better, which means you don't require those technologies to get through the SAP calculation. However, what I would say, building regs is moving on, and by the time we actually build out this phase, we may well be subject to new building regulations, and it may well be a consideration at that point. As I say, at the moment, we don't need to do it for the SAP calculations, but we do offer it as an option for our customers on this development, so it's there if people wish to take it up.
Thank you very much for that, much appreciated. Could I just come back on the space standards, because it is over 50% don't meet it, and I just thought in the time that's happened since the previous developments 2A and 2B, surely you could have got a better percentage, if not all fine, but is there any chance that you can actually improve on that before we get to develop, the stage? I mean, I just don't think it's acceptable otherwise. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the smaller homes are probably the ones subject to not being NDSS compliant in comparison to the larger homes. As I believe the officer's presentation explained, this is tending to be a higher density character area. So phase 2C, which you've got before you today, probably has a lower NDSS compliant ratio on that basis. When we look to build out phase 2D, the layout will become more looser and some larger units will come into force. Equally, I would say, Taylor Wimpey is looking at new house type range as we speak, and we're trying to introduce those onto this development. So for those of you who have been party to visiting site in recent weeks, you may well see a bit of a reshuffle in terms of our show area, for example, where we're looking to utilise newer house types and moving forward new house types, which then will bring in some NDSS compliance in and increase that percentage.
Thank you. I've got a few points that I'm trying to form into questions. Given that this is one of the higher density parts of the development, can you explain why there are still few 1 and 2 bedroom properties, and yet you've just said phase 2D is going to be less dense and therefore have some larger units, and we've heard from the officer that phase 2D needs to have more of the 1 bedroomed properties in it. This is my first point, if that makes sense.
Yes, it's quite correct. As the officer's presentation explained, there will be additional 1 beds in the subsequent phase. It really is just down to, when we've looked at this development, rather than draw it in isolation, and we've actually tried to draw all of the 600 homes as one large proving layout. The reason we brought before you this application in a smaller piece, I think it allows easier consideration for members, but those one beds are coming at a later date. It's more cumulative why that coverage will drop off a little bit, because we've got more external spaces fronting into open space, and I believe one of the members made reference to the likes of the Paupers' Graves. There's POS areas to the south, so invariably we would look to loosen the layout in those scenarios, but yes, the one beds will come forward.
If I can just add to that as well, I think people have mentioned various things earlier in the discussion. They mentioned the area action plan, the policies that are sort of guiding this development. And we must remember that when we were doing that area action plan back in 2008, 2009 times, on there was also a development brief that a lot of people were involved in. Obviously, that set out how the whole of Chiltern Leys was going to come forward, including the original phase, which we often tend to forget, the first 215 houses and the primary school from there. But what we've now got is the sort of the middle phase, which was always intended to be the higher density area on there. What we've then got, and this is not in front of us today, so it's a bit difficult to sort of have a discussion about phase 2C, and obviously without talking about phase 2D, even though that is not an application in front of us. We need to be mindful that whatever is determined here today is going to have an influence on how 2D, and particularly the Paupers' Graves, is going to look. We're probably all aware that there may be other requirements of that particular phase later on down the line in terms of sports provision and how that's going to look. But in terms of what we've got in front of us today, there is the 234 houses. It was always intended to be a higher density, obviously not towards the east and towards the west, which is defined by its sort of rural edge character to the west, and butting onto Chiltern Fields, the playing fields on there, but it's already been contained by the existing road network. Now, what we've got is a series of different types of properties around the open spaces that have been an important part of the development brief, because it's important to remember that there were specific views that were identified all those years ago, particularly to various churches and to various access points, so that people would be able to see from where we are on the top of Northfield View, looking down towards various areas. And that has dictated the sort of density and where we can actually fit some of these particular types of houses and numbers in. What it does mean is there is going to be a requirement that is going to be placed on this final phase later on down the line that we will have to address. And the points that I think people have raised in terms of different types of housing mix that the officers from the authority have identified is something that we, as a developer, are very aware of. I think, again, in terms of consultation, that will be a very interesting element. We know that the people from one house have been very keen of how it's going to deal with the Paupers' Graves. But if I refer it back, what we've got in front of us this morning to determine is the 234 houses and how that started to look. So hopefully that gives people a little bit of context of still things to be determined later.
Okay, yes, you want to come back?
Back with my other query, relating to the rear parking courts and the EV provision. Given that we've been told that magic number 98 houses are going to have, is that right, 98 houses are going to have an EV charging point, do I take it that the remaining 136 dwellings all have parking in rear parking courts? And I presume that this is something that Taylor Wimpey or have on other developments. And what is your experience of people using rear parking courts, or do they all park across the lovely, nice, wide bike path and block it, or are they parking on the road? Thank you.
We have, across our developments, we have strong usage of our rear car parking courts. They're not desirable, I think is a fair comment. It's sometimes a constraint applied by the character of the development and the requirements of the higher density. To answer your question specific to the provision of the EV, what we've put before you today is as I suggested, based upon if you've got on-plot parking. It's not a case of every other parking space is a rear car court. It's where you've got segregation between your parking provision and there may well be an adoptable road or an adoptable footpath, as the instance may well be. As I explained, there's elements which can be overcome, and as I believe as the officer's presentation suggested at the start, it may well be that we can take that away and look to improve the quantum of EV charging on this development by seeing where we can cross localised areas such as public footpaths, for example. Not a public footpath in the sense of a public right-of-way, but as in a footpath creation. I think it becomes very difficult when you've got a completely remote rear car court, but there's opportunities for us to explore sort of after this.
And can you answer my query about, I mean, particularly if you've got any rear parking courts in phase 1, which is now pretty much occupied, what would you feel is the resident use of a rear parking court in your developments, regardless of whether they've got EV points on? Just do people actually park in them?
Yes, I think is the short answer. Yeah, we've not had, in terms of our customer services department, believe me, the two biggest issues we have are parking and bins. On Northfield View, I'm pleased to say we have very little kickback in that regard. People do use the rear car courts. It seems to work well. They are allocated parking space. We do have a quantum of visitors parking then within them as well, because everybody have people visiting their homes. But yeah, excellent usage, to be honest, and they're relatively well landscaped as well, so they are a pleasant environment to park and be in as part of your extended home.
And what is the sort of natural surveillance of the rear parking courts? Do the houses, can people view them, or do people feel that they're a dodgy area because they're around the back?
They tend to be well lit. One of the things we do make sure is we always consult with the Secure by Design officer and get their feedback. Invariably, they look for an element of observation that can be undertaken. So typically, you'll see a 1.8 metre closed boarded fence reduced to 1.5 with trellis on the top. That allows an element of observation in those areas. They're not dark, dingy spaces. Those days are gone, thankfully, for us all. They are, as I say, a pleasant environment to park your vehicle and a safe environment to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Field, do you have any questions?
I think so. Yeah, just surprised your recent comments. You're telling us that EV charging is extremely difficult because one has to install cables across third-party land. And yet you've also just told us that rear parking courts are well lit. Lighting usually to me involves electricity and LEDs or something like that. So presumably you can resolve the problem when you're putting lights in, but can't resolve it when you're trying to charge a car, which seems slightly strange. So I'll leave that to you. The point I was making really is about the building regs. You're talking about fabric first. I know I have the officer's reassurance, but I just want to be sure which version, what we're doing in this development. Because as I understand it, we're supposed to be agreeing what will be done, not agreeing a framework in which you and the officers can develop a plan. So just to go to building regs, the new version, which is coming out in June, uplifts insulation by 30%, I think. Perhaps, as equally as important, ensures that the heating system, the radiators basically, are designed for I think a 55 degrees C flow temperature, which allows you to subsequently retrofit the boilers with heat pumps, because heat pumps can't achieve 70-degree flow temperatures. And that is critical to future residents because there's a cost associated, which I'm sure your sales literature will point out to them, but there you go. So I'm trying to be certain about which version of the building regs you'll be building to, that when you talk about fabric first, it will be to the new higher standard. And I think that higher standard also brings SAP calculations which insist on a certain amount of renewable energy generated at the property, which is an obvious feeder for the solar panels, which you seem reluctant to install. I do realise they're sort of 100 quid each nowadays, so it's not trivial to put 8 of them on the roof, but there you go. So if you could answer those questions, the ones that really were questions, I'll be grateful. Thank you.
I think I'll be able to answer those. So I suppose the main crux of your question seems to relate around the fabric approach and the building regulatory changes. So We are in a transitional period with the building regulations. You're quite right to highlight that. What's very difficult for us as a developer as to support this application is that unfortunately the SAP software for the emerging building regulations to come into play as of June of next year, as you articulated, isn't available yet. So unfortunately the government's on a little bit of a go slow. That's been promised to us since probably September of last year, still unavailable. And it's why we can't agree with absolute certainty on what we will be doing on future phases. But what we do know is that we do have gas on this development, and we will be looking to install gas boilers as of today. That's what our energy statement supporting this application makes reference to. We also know what building regs we're building to now, i.e. with the current SAP software, and what we can make reference to. June 2023, building regulations changes. There's a shift, as you it just explained. Part L and F is changing. It will be looking for an increased U-value performance, so the external walls, the floors, the loft insulation, etc., doors, fenestration, everything will need to improve. That should lower heating bills for our customers. It ensures a better building envelope. But to accompany that, you're quite correct that there's a regulatory shift towards encouraging people to install the likes of air source heat pumps or get away from gas boilers. That's something that Taylor Wimpey will be looking to do. Also adaptability in our homes. So when those customers, if they do have gas boilers on our current phases or future phases, those houses can be converted to the likes of air source heat pumps. You can change to oversized radiators, elements such as that. I'm hoping I've covered your answer to your question.
Can I just follow up on that particular point then? Just, John, do you mind if I just follow up on that point? So, I mean, we get many house builders that come here, and we get some that come in and say the building regs are changing in 2023. We're already delivering what we expect to be in the 2023. We're building today to 2023 standards, and we're putting in air source heat pumps because that's the future. And in fact, we're way ahead of the 2023. But what you keep saying is, well, it's changing and we'll catch up. In 2023, you talked about in 2023, when the new regs come in, that's when we'll make the changes to PV panels. In 2023, that's when we're going to change to air source heat pumps. So is the policy not to be looking ahead, but just to change as the building regs change? Because we get a very different story from other builders that come before this committee who are making all those changes now and have come in here and said they've scrapped gas and they're doing air source heat pumps. Not all of them, I might add, but some.
Yeah, understood. And if this was a new development, a complete standalone one, I probably would be coming and talking to you about us doing exactly that. Because this is a continuation phase for us, there's a lot of continuity in what we're doing on that development. However, I don't wish to mislead anybody. I'm not saying that it will be June 2023 that we'll make the step change because we're forced to do it. I'd actually quite like to be doing it in advance of that. The issue we don't have the SAP software to back up what that is. So if other... Yep. Yeah, and you can do that. You can make the step change now. I don't know. I can't speak on behalf of other developers and what's been put forward before members. But there are a few issues in the current markets that we're all aware of. There's an energy crisis, for example. Electric heating costs around 4 times as much as gas as of today. As a responsible builder, we're looking at that because actually it makes more economical sense to run off gas at the moment. That's not future-proofed, and we fully understand that air source heat pumps or other alternatives are going to be the way forward. So that is a consideration for us. Equally, at the moment, if you do provide air source heat pumps under the current building regulations, part of the SAP software, so the standard assessment procedure, it generates a PEA, which is a predicted energy assessment. Under a gas boiler, that gives you an A rating, which obviously from a sales and marketing perspective is exactly what our customers will be looking for. If we changed over to an air source heat pump, just a straight swap, it drops you down to around a C rating at the moment. So suddenly you're trying to market something which is down to a C, and customers are like, oh, what does that mean? In conjunction with rising energy costs. At the moment, as a developer, we're a little bit uncomfortable with making that step change. We're going to have to do it, we will do it, but we want to do it in a managed format. So Taylor Wimpey as a group is trying to understand, with the evolution of the building regulations, what we would do to complement air source heat pumps. And there's been several comments raised today regarding photovoltaics, for an example, PV, where we've to date chosen to focus more on a fabric-first approach rather than add a technology. So we're trying to make the homes cheaper to run before you then put something on top. When the real building regulations change or the SAP software comes forward and we can actually say with absolute, the definition, as it were, we're likely to bring in PV as a standard approach. And I would have loved to sat here before members today and spoken about introducing air source heat pumps and photovoltaics. And in all honesty, that is what we are very, very likely to do on these homes. But I don't want to deceive any members today and say that's what we're going to do, because we just don't have the SAP software available to us at the moment to confirm that approach.
That was a very useful explanation, so thank you for that. Councillor Field, back to you.
Could I return just for a second? Yeah, to point out, it sounds like you're using the 2013 SAP software, which is only a spreadsheet, which I certainly am using. There are commercial packages available that are much better than that. But this is not a debate, this is questions. So the next question I really had was this one about open space, the provision of it, just to be certain that you're providing, presumably at considerable cost. What about the maintenance of open space and indeed the maintenance of the various private drives we talk about, which seem to be roads that serve several houses? Conventionally, that's put upon some form of management company, which can be local resident driven, can be developer driven, can be some independent group. I wondered what Taylor Wimpey's policy is. Obviously, my concerns were around the reasonableness of the cost for an amount of maintenance that has to be done. And we all understand maintenance costs money, but there can be a world of difference between a resident-run company and some organisation which is in it for the profit, dare I say. So I wonder if you could just make it clear to me what you're doing. Thank you.
So this development, or this phase of the development, I should say, would follow what we've done previously, which was where we'd have a management company taking care of all of our open space provision. As you've alluded to, there's invariably a monthly charge on our customers for that. That's something that we've been able to look at previously and we'll look to do on this scheme. That monthly charge from our perspective needs to be at a reasonable rate so customers can afford to do it. And I'm pleased to say that that's at an acceptable level on the historical phases and will continue to be on this one. So all of the open space will all be covered by that management company.
Just return. I mean, I'm aware of locations of large developments where the management charges have quadrupled from what's reasonable to 4 times what's reasonable. Can I just make sure that you can assure us that does not happen in your operations?
Yeah, so there's some longevity in that question. From our perspective, it's sort of a little bit subjective what is an acceptable amount to pay on a management company charge. I don't have to hand the figure in front of me today what we've got on the previous phase, but I know as a business we deemed that to be acceptable for customers, and I know again we spoke about customer services a moment ago. We don't have any issues with what's being offered. It's part of the point of sale. Customers are fully aware that it's a consideration for their affordability when they buy that development, and it's explained to them exactly what that money goes towards and how it's looked after.
Sir Matheson.
Thank you. Well, yeah, it's a little bit unfair being the last person each time. Most of my questions have been asked, but
good.
I haven't liked any of the answers that I've heard so far. So I'm going to pick at some of them a little bit further. Right, let's take the electric vehicle charging parking courts first. Now, this committee, and indeed the other committee, because I'm there sometimes, have heard and gradually worked to a kind of acceptable point where trunking is provided to the parking courts to enable in the future the electricity be taken there. Mr. Councillor Fields made a very good point that the lighting will have got the electric there already anyway. So that, can you not at least do what the other developers are doing of providing the trunking? That's the first question. So the second question revisits the question of the building regulations 2023. So what we're looking at is 234 dwellings, and you will need to start applying new regulations to the houses and flats that you haven't commenced by 12 months' time. And knowing the speed at which things move, I think that's quite a high challenge. So, I think you really need to be further ahead, as the chair's also said, on that. Can you really commence them all before next June? I don't think so, really. So that's the second problem that I have.
Let's answer those two questions, then we'll come back.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, just to respond to that second point, we won't have commenced them before the trigger point of June 2023, and apologies if I didn't articulate that correctly in my response earlier. What we will be building those to the June 2023 standards in all likelihood. The reason we can't sit before you today and confirm that is purely because of the SAP software not being available to be able to confirm what that will be. But we will be building them, as you've correctly explained, to the revised standards, which is why we've spoken about the lack of PV on this development as a standard approach in the previous phases. I'm quite happy to sit here today and talk about there will be PV on this phase, but we've not put it before members because I don't wish to deceive or anybody, because we just don't, because the energy statement is being used to back up the planning application. So that's the justification by why we would be looking to do what we're doing, and because I haven't got the software to back it up, I can't incorporate in the energy statement. However, as I believe was explained by the officer during their presentation, we would be happy to provide PV as a matter of course on this development if members deem that an acceptable condition.
John, your next question.
Yes. Right. So the other. So we've got that. We've heard a little bit more about building regs.
Just talk about. Sorry,
yeah.
John.
Sorry. I'm just looking for.
John, one sec. You didn't talk about trunking. Trunking of.
Good point.
Trunking to the courtyard.
Trunking to the courts. That's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, and as I said, as explained earlier, in terms of what we've put before members today is based on plot parking provision only. I believe, as the officer explained, we've had further conversations and can look to improve upon that. So trunking to future-proof potential future availability of the EV would be a consideration. And on that basis, I'm more than happy to take that away and review that with officers for how we can stretch what we've already indicated today to increase those potential numbers.
Is there perhaps a condition there that we can
John,
start
it's too early. It's too early.
I was just asking the officers that make a note of that one, please.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. It's just questions.
Yeah. So
for
the other thing, and Councillor Eburn asked about NDSS compliance and so on, and I think the answer was that there was over 50% of the affordable homes would not be compliant. Was that the answer correctly that I understood?
My understanding is 51% would not be compliant.
Right, and so what? And presumably the market properties will be all compliant.
No, so across this development, the homes are not targeted to be NDSS compliant. That's something that's sort of stepped into modern requirements for new build housing. When this application was looked at and considered under the outline, it wasn't a requirement, and there's no policy background to that. However, what Taylor Wimpey has tried to do where we can is maximise the number of units which are NDSS compliant. Unfortunately, we can't do that with all of them. However, in terms of our contacts with the housing associations, etc., we're not seeing that as anything which is holding up the sales and occupations of any homes to present date. However, it is something we're considering looking at for future developments.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That you've strayed into my supplementary question really about the NDSS non-compliance and so on. And my question was going to be: are you confident that the social landlords will want to take on all these non-compliant properties? And I think you're saying yes, they will. Are you?
Yes. However, on new developments, they are pushing more and more for NDSS compliancy. But within this development, the registered social landlord to whom we are using is happy with the quantum of houses and having no issues with having any occupations.
This is
John, you can't give a... John, it's not time for a view now. That's in debate. It's questions. Okay, you done? Okay, Councillor Passmore.
Thanks, Matthew. I just want to go back to the points I raised earlier about permeability of driveways, because I think it's really important as we live in a really dry part of the country, not directly to do with highways, it's the permeability there because of the scarcity of water and aquifers. So would you be prepared to take that away and perhaps have that as a condition? And then the other one I mentioned, happy with the planting scheme that's been dealt with by Jasmine. This issue about a reasonable number of Swift boxes, swallow cups, which most developers would do, and I'm sure you'd be more than happy to do that, but could you confirm that, please? Thank you, that's all.
Yes, it answers both questions. In terms of the permeability, that's something I'm happy to go away and have a look at, see what we can do. Obviously, we've consulted with the LFA, there's no holding objections towards our drainage strategy on this development, so we're very happy and content with that, and pleased that the LFA are also content. In terms of ecological enhancements, I believe the ecology would have been considered already at this stage. However, Taylor Wimpey actually goes above and beyond any policy requirements for ecological enhancements. We have our own sustainability banners in the sense that we will look to provide hedgehog highways, bat boxes, bird boxes, etc. And I'm pleased to say we'll go above and beyond any policy requirements for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor, two more questions. Councillor Mayor and Councillor Field. Or the other way.
I hope this is a brief one. I just wanted to point out that I'm looking at a company called Checker Trade. It says building reg changes in 2022. And it goes on about the Department of Levelling Up Homes and Communities introduce changes which will take effect 15th June 2022. Is that wrong?
It's correct. It's basically you have to have the plots registered under the building regs by June 2022, and it's any plot you start after June 2023. So there's a year's transition whereby it's a registration element before you start actually physically building the house.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to your gas heating, I'm afraid. Are there any plans to install underfloor heating, which obviously works with gas boilers and works very well with heat pumps?
I think yes is the short answer. With air source heat pumps, as I believe one of your colleagues explained, they run at a much lower heating rate. It makes far more sense, therefore, to have the likes of underfloor heating being utilised, oversized radiators running at a lower heat. Apologies to keep referring back to the SAP calculations, but when we spoke to independent assessors, that's where we're being led towards. So in all likelihood on this development, you will see that coming into play without a doubt, yes.
With all likelihood?
99% sure, yes, it will be the case.
So
yeah.
Can you make a statement, all properties on this development will have underfloor heating?
I think that's going to be subject to the SAP software, and that's why apologies to keep leaning back on that, but at the moment, when we spoke to independent SAP assessors, it seems very, very likely we'll introduce underfloor heating to ground floors, oversized radiators, and look to bring in air source heat pumps in conjunction with the building reg shifts. That's where we are. I don't wish to deceive members by making any pledges which I can't make today, but that's our full intention. But as of today, we're still with gas until we can make those calls.
Okay. Every likelihood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the ward members. We have two ward members. First one, Councillor Humphreys. Please, this is from Councillor Humphreys. Please accept my apologies not to be able to attend today due to a late work commitment. As ward member, I have no concerns on the application. Again, my sincere apologies. Barry Humphreys. The other ward members, Councillor Morrison, who I haven't had any correspondence from. Okay, so members, it's over to you to discuss, debate and come to a conclusion.
Thank you. I'm happy to start. I mean, obviously, this site is a continuation of various sites, Phase 1, Phase 2A, Phase 2B, so we kind of expect to see more of the same, really. And overall, that's what's delivered. I think I'm just somewhat disappointed that it is more of the same and more could be done on the overall energy efficiency, so including more renewables, more, given the state most people's budgets, household budgets are in today, I just think there could be a lot more that can be done. I'm very disappointed about the space standards. It's all very well the registered housing providers saying that they'll accept the houses, but you're expecting people to live in them. Some of these, the space standards are 20% less than they should be in these affordables, and I just think that that's very poor, and I think a lot more could be done, given a company of Taylor Wimpey's size, that they should be better on these kind of things. And I find it very interesting about the rear parking courts, and there's been a lot of discussion, but I counted them up and there's 17 of them that I can see, which is a big number. And again, I think more could be done there. But I think my main concerns really are just the overall energy efficiency of the units on this site that would help improve household bills, as well as kind of obviously contributing in terms of less carbon and so on, but particularly the space standards. So as the site seems to be, you know, it is another extension of the previous developments across Chiltern, but I just feel at the moment could do better, and I'd wait to hear what the rest of my colleagues say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Passman.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, if we were to, I want to listen to what others are going to say first. I am inclined to support this, but I do think there needs to be conditions. For example, as Rachel was just saying about energy efficiency, I would like to be convinced that we are really maximising what is being done there, and I think there's a degree of trust here. Actually, we do have other developers, as you said, Chairman, that do actually put down in writing before the applications they will maximise the other sources of energy. I absolutely get the efficiency bit, that's very, very welcome, so I'm not going to be overcritical. And I do think the issue about trunking, as John mentioned, for future-proofing, for electric charging, frankly, that ought to be common sense, and we should be doing that. And I would hope that we would be able, if it is approved, that we would be able to work together as the council, Jasmine, the planning officers and colleagues to deal with that. And again, if it were to be approved, I would like to see a condition regarding the biodiversity, as explained earlier, and the permeability of the driveways. So I'll listen to the others, but I am inclined, I'm not formally proposing acceptance because there may be other conditions that we need to add, but I would certainly, if I were to support it, want to have those 4 items down there. And as I say, there will have to be that degree of trust between yourselves and the planning team to make sure that there is at least a generous movement to that direction. And I know, you know, I'll just remind everybody on page 37, we've got to look at these reserved matters only, and I know our hands are somewhat restricted because of that, but that's where we are, so we have to look at what we've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manson.
Thank you, Chair. I think this application is really highlighting a major issue in that the Outline Planning Permission was so long ago and things have moved on. And I think what we've got here is very much a, you know, almost a 20th century housing development, and we're all really disappointed in it because things are hopefully moving apace. You know, nationally regarding electric vehicles and heating energy resources. Whilst I completely appreciate that this is meant to be the sort of higher density part of the whole development as a whole, the large development on the side of Stowmarket, and I welcome the open space and the bike paths and all that stuff that goes with it. I think that's fantastic. But maybe I've got this little niggling feeling that we're trying to cram too many houses into this phase. I'm very concerned about the rear parking courts, not just on the basis of the fact that we have to put ducting in for EV charging, and I think that will be a problem many households will have in the future because of all the terrace housing in streets and that. And here we are in a development that's going to be built post-2023, and it won't have EV charging points, and that just seems wrong to me. That's one of the issues with the rear parking courts. The other one is, are people actually going to park in them? Because a lot of those houses that have got parking in the rear parking courts have got a lovely bike path right in front of them that will look to the majority of residents as a nice big piece of concrete they can park their car on, rather than let me cycle past it nicely. So I've got all these worries about it. I completely agree with Councillor Eburne's comments about the space standards. If the house is too small to be registered as a 3-bedroomed house, then it should be a 2-bedroomed house, and then it would probably meet the space standards. So I don't quite understand. I know that there's this sort of trend that, oh, we can put a tiny little bedroom in and call it an office, and actually it's a 3-bedroom, but actually it's a 2-bedroom house, but we're going to call it 3-bedroom, but it's not a 3-bedroom because you can't fit a bed in the 3rd bedroom. So there are all these little niggling things, and then my point I would like to make is we appear to have false chimneys on these houses, and that's yet another source of heat leakage and things that look like things that they're not. So they're almost like too many little things that are bugging me for me to really be supporting this application, much as I welcome parts of it. And I just think you're right, maybe we could do a bit better. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, this development has got many good features, including the obvious fact that we need to deliver houses to the population. It's a necessary thing to be doing. And there is an outline permission, obviously, to achieve that. The concerns really are those that others have expressed, that really we're just not being ambitious enough about certain of the standards, whether that be sticking false plastic chimneys on housing or lacking EV charging points, even permeable drives, which I thought were actually part of the regulations, but there you go. And the critical ones, the issues of heat loss from buildings and heating. To an extent, you can retrofit heating, providing you're designing the system to adopt the lower flow temperatures which you get with different devices. And we get arguments that say electricity costs 4 times what gas costs, which is painfully true. But what it misses is the fact that a heat pump generates at least 3, if not 4 times the amount of heat per unit of energy used of a gas boiler. So it's clearly a fallacy and clearly badly argued. So I find, to say, basically good development, but lacking ambition, certainly on the environmental front, and that impacts on the ongoing maintenance and heating costs for the potential occupiers. So we seem to be building things that will be obsolete and require rework within a very short period. You know, I'm sorely tempted to suggest rejection. The concern I would have there is that then leads us to an appeal, which is a costly process, and delays housing which people desperately need. So I shall continue to listen, but I'm certainly not particularly happy with this development.
Thanks. Councillor Mayer's got his hand up next, and I'll go after Councillor Mayer.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I echo much of what my colleagues have said. This development is disappointing. We're looking at layout. The layout, is a layout acceptable if we know that it is not future-proofed and will not allow charging of electric vehicles in the future? The developer find it difficult to install them now. The residents will find it even worse later on. But I have no doubt the officers will tell us that we're judging the layout based on legislation today. So whilst it is hugely disappointing, and I think it just lacks imagination, we've got a management company managing the common areas. Why can't the management company manage EV charging points and make a small charge? They have cables for lights, they can have it is solvable. So whilst it's disappointing, I struggle to find any reason to vote against. And that's the point I would put before my colleagues. We might not like it, but nobody has yet come up, I think, with a justifiable reason for not approving this. And I look forward to hearing what others have to say. Thank you.
Did you want to go first, Councillor Meston, and come in after you?
Yeah, I would like to. I mean, I think the excuse me. I had also noted, particularly to come back to the point of electricity costs 4 times gas, and I'm grateful to Councillor Field. I mean, the relative costs of those are moving rapidly in uncomfortable directions. And apart from the efficiency of the use of the electricity, almost 3 times what's put in will be produced in heat. And certainly the underfloor heating really wants to be 100% to make sense of this. There is the decarbonisation of the electricity grid, which means that in sustainability terms, the electricity will have a lower carbon impact. And we've had people come to put that point to us and say, well, look, it's all right using electric heating because after all, the grid's only 60% fossil fuel or something now. And that is pulling against this at the moment very badly. And I think we inevitably have to think, where's this gas coming from? And that's a problem which we won't go into today. And I think apart from that, there are so many things, as other members have said, but I have the advantage, or not really, of having been involved in watching this site from its very inception in 2008, as officers have said, and the production of the design brief and of the Stowmarket Area Action Plan, of which it's a fundamental part, and so on and so on. So I am more than a bit disappointed. I am very, very disappointed. I look back and think about some of the things that were talked about back in those days. We had a place shaping group, and that group came up with a lot of ideas, and Taylor Wimpey were very receptive at that time. And unfortunately, for reasons that I've never understood, place shaping groups were stopped. So latter phases have not had the continuous engagement that would have probably solved some of the problems that members have been referring to. And I am disappointed looking at the bigger picture now. No, there are no allotments. We did not get the structural landscaping. Arguing the toss about whether the landscaping should be put in this summer or next autumn, it should have been put in a dozen years ago after two of the trees. If you look at the landscaping, you'll see there are 2 blocks of green TPO trees. The gap in between was very cruelly created, which led to the TPOs being put on the rest of them. That gap we should have been trying to fill 10 years ago, because by now we'd have some trees there. We've talked about the bus service. Insofar as the bus service has been created into the existing built-out phase of this, it's been created by pinching service away from bungalows and elderly people in roads like St Edmunds Road and Thirlmere Drive, which is not an addition to anything at all. It's subtracting from the people that needed it most to meet a planning condition that said there should be a bus service. And that makes me very unhappy. Obviously, the sustainability generally ought to be better than it is. When we were doing this in 2008, we were working with an environment where the government of the day had said we would have building 0 emissions by 2015, and 7 years from then. And of course, that got stopped. And here we are, we can't even get 0 emissions being built in 2022-23, which is absolutely ridiculous, frankly. And I just cannot support oh yes, and the last point, nearly missed that one, the connectivity of this overall site into Stowmarket is actually unsatisfactory. We could not get satisfactory cycling provision from phase 1 into Stowmarket. Now this one is a little bit better because of where it lies, you've got a different connectivity which is better, but it's still not off-road. which it could be. It could be through what are they called now? Low traffic zones or something. You know, it is just so not good enough that I just cannot actually support it. And I think that the point's been well made that about the, you know, that maybe we're just trying to put too many houses into this space. And I would just like to hear from officers the consequence. If we approve 234 on this 2C, how many are we required to squeeze into on 2D, and what would be the density on 2D? And I think that is a question that is actually some relevance to this phase.
We'll come back to that question. I think I just need to remind you that we are not being asked to decide lots of things beyond. We are only being asked today to decide on appearance, on scale, on landscaping and layout. And you've got to be really careful when you start talking about lots of things that are not relevant to today's meeting. So I just remind you of that, because, you know, if this goes to appeal and you're talking about things that are totally irrelevant, we know where that leads. So my view is, I don't disagree with nearly what everyone said. I think this application is disappointing. It is, whoever made the comment is it's in the past. It is in that past. It isn't looking forward. It's not forward thinking. But on what basis can I refuse it? I can't refuse it on space standard because that's a new introductory thing that came in since this was first given permission. So while 51% are not meeting the space standard, which is really poor, and is really, and I think Councillor Mansell made the really good point of why don't you convert it to a 2-bedroom house instead of a 3-bedroom to make it, you know, but of course not, because we know why. So it doesn't meet the space standards currently, but this is from the past. The EV charging points, I'm at a loss. We have most developers who'll come in and say it will be secured everywhere or there'll be trunking in place. There's no questions asked. That's a given, like broadband now. The triple parking is just about acceptable. The 17 parking courts, even the applicant said parking courts are not desirable. And actually, I have been to parking courts and people don't always observe them. 17 is too many. Now, to me, appearance, scale, landscape and layout, parking courts is part of that. So that, to me, that fails the test on what's before us today. I don't believe this is an appropriate layout. On the EV charging points, I think more work needs to be done. On the solar panels, well, we're being told it will be on every house, but why isn't it just in the application to give us that confidence? The heating, we're told it is likely to move, but we're not 100% sure. We're talking it's likely to be underfloor heating, but again, it's not in the papers. So from my perspective, and here's where I need the advice of Gemma and Ian, please. For me, I'm going to really struggle to support this because it is so far removed from what we would really want. But the policies I appreciate we're dealing with policies from the past rather than policies in the future. So to me, we only have two options. I can't refuse it because I don't think there's enough grounds from my perspective. I don't know what the committee thinks, but I'm really not happy with it. So what happens if we defer it and ask for far more discussions to go on around the parking courts, the trunking, the heating, because some of those are around landscape, layout and scale and appearance. Yeah, and a couple of questions, more questions. Yeah, Tim and...
Well, just very quickly, and I agree with everything you said there, Matthew. Is it possible, and would it be compliant, asking our planning colleagues here to put in the conditions about energy? If necessary, defer it, fine, but would it be possible to condition things in order to deal with those issues, to work with the applicants to get them resolved? Because, you know, I get the point about the legislation where we are, we all understand that. I do think it would be very difficult to refuse it, and I think we need to use some pragmatic common sense here. I think that you've heard the will of the committee or the various views. Is it possible to condition it in order to take this forward and get that resolved? I get it about the number of houses, that's off the agenda. As Matthew said, we've got to look at page 37, paragraph 12.1. Those issues about energy, biodiversity, I think we've dealt with permeability, the trunking, these sorts of things. Can we condition that if we were to approve it or not? What would be reasonable? And I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine, no problem at all. Yeah, absolutely. There's some things we can condition. There are other things that would be more difficult. So the two things I think that we couldn't do by condition would be the NDSS. I think that, as we said before, has come in since this outline was put up. It's also not a policy requirement. So I think if we were stuck on NDSS, I would say we don't have the policy background, unfortunately, to go and do that. So we would have to leave that. And the parking courts, because that's part of the layout, either we are approving or we're not. I wouldn't say we could do that by condition. On the positive side, absolutely we can do a condition on EV parking, that you as members want that to include ducting to parking courts. We can certainly secure a scheme for that. The details of the permeable driveway, we can make sure that we include in the sustainability scheme. Jasmine has already put a condition on, but we can specify that that should include PV provision to be agreed. And the biodiversity enhancement scheme that you mentioned, we can certainly condition on one of those things. And equally, if there are more details or specifics that I haven't covered and we want to add those in, we absolutely can. Does that help at all?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just be, I'd be happy to see stronger conditions, but I'd just be anxious about, given what we've, the disappointment we all feel in what we've got today, that those conditions, of being confident that those conditions meet what we're asking. And if we defer, but defer on very, very specific points for them to come back, so we know that those can be met. But equally, one was mentioned, I think, Jasmine, at the beginning of your presentation, that ecology haven't even provided their conditions yet, so we don't actually even know what any of those might be. So I would just be concerned that had the amount of things that have been raised, that whether they can actually be met. I just want some advice on that.
I mean, certainly ecology conditions, we can add those, and that would be something we would expect to do based on the ecology comments we've got. We'd also suggested the biodiversity enhancement strategy in any case, so we would have that controlled as well. But yes, absolutely, we would expect to add those in. I mean, my other question would be, would you want this to come back to committee if we go away and resolve those things? Would you be happy to delegate to us on those various points?
I think what I would suggest is we draw up a list of possible things that could be added, and then the committee votes. And if it takes you far enough, only individual members know whether it takes them to that point of finding it acceptable. If that fails, then we can go to a second vote on deferring it. But I think that's the route I'd like to go. I think we should go for a vote on with the conditions and see where members feel that takes them far enough. I think that's the logical route. If that's the route the committee wants to go down, that's kind of what I'm hearing. I can't bring you back in, I'm afraid. Councillor Mansell and Councillor Field.
Yeah, I completely get where you're coming from about the parking courts, and allowing ducting for EV is a compromise that might be acceptable, because if you say, okay, we're not going to accept parking courts at all, or we want fewer parking courts, which I got the impression that that's what Councillor Higgs was trying to say, something about parking courts. I honestly don't think you could cram that many houses into that site and still have all the delightful open space and bike paths. So I think we have to, if we're going to accept these parking courts, I think they've damn well got to have EV charging ducting at a minimum. Otherwise, I really don't think that we can have that many houses in this space and still meet within the open space provision that the outline or the, whatever it's indicative layout promised us way back in whenever it was, 2018 or something, 2017. And those are all the nice bits about this development. So,
Can I just say I agree wholeheartedly.
We can't. I don't think we can get rid of those parking
That's why
courts.
I think what we should do is we should put a proposal forward for someone to propose with all the conditions and see if that takes members far enough to support it. If it doesn't, then we go to, that would be my thought process. Councillor Field, you wanted to come in next?
Risk of saying the opposite, that I thought that deferment was the best approach. Otherwise, we are trying to, whatever it is, write the law on the hoof while we're here, which is always a bit difficult. I'll go along with your view, but let's look at
the reason I'm worried about that is we're all agreeing what we want to condition, so we might be able to condition it now so that actually it doesn't have to be deferred. but let's see where it goes.
Let's see where it goes.
Can I have someone who would be happy to put that forward, and then we can run through the conditions and see where that takes us? Councillor Passmore.
Yes, in order to move debate on, Chairman, I'm happy to put that forward to agree it with a list of conditions, and
Let's
if we
run
put it to
through
the
those
vote,
now.
and then if that doesn't...
Okay, can I have a seconder for that? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Field. Okay. So I've got a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations, but now we're going to run through a list of conditions that we would expect to be 100% cast iron conditions. So shall we run through those around the room? We've heard various people. Who wants to go first? Yeah, Councillor Manson.
We want ducting to the parking spaces in the rear parking, to all the parking spaces, or each dwelling should have access to at least one ducted EV point. We want permeable driveways and rear parking courts, or whatever else you call a driveway. We want maximising the solar panels, making sure the heating is, that's probably not under things, is it? No, we're not allowed to do making sure they're whatever, compatible with future. We can't do that one. What were the other things we wanted to do? Biodiversity, early planting of the trees. I'll let other people carry on now.
Go back to Gemma, or can you just talk about the solar panels? What we can condition on solar? Can we say solar panels throughout, and what can we do about the heating internally?
I might draw in here, but my advice would be that planning is always the position of we shouldn't interfere where other legislation dictates. So therefore we shouldn't, if something is dealt with by building regs, we shouldn't go there. Did you?
I agree, yes.
Can we put informatives?
I'm very happy to do an advisory note or an informative.
We could do an informative that we expect this to be built to 2023 building regs standards, but
2023
no, it's
spec, it's
2023,
just they have to
John.
register it in 2022 in order to use the...
Which are kind of this, can I say, the building regs 2023 is a given, really, but if we want to have it yeah, we can. So at the moment, I've got ducting so that each property has one charging point as a minimum, permeable driveway, solar panels throughout, biodiversity and early planting, and as an informative 2023 building regs as a minimum. Is there anything that I've forgotten? Yeah, Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, a bit more detail. I mean, on the biodiversity and so on, looking for the swift brick. I think hedgehog highways are mentioned. House Martin cups are not.
He's already covered that.
You've got the House Martins as well. Good. Right. Yeah. And then the other thing generally about that is the warm light, not white light, biodiversity point, which we hopefully got to keep having reminded each time until it comes forward as a given.
I think that's pretty standard now, isn't
well, it? You'd like to hope so,
okay.
But this is the one where everything's wrong.
The developer is nodding, it is standard now. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the parking, the number of parking courts and layouts, and I really need an answer to the, what are we going to put in 2D, bearing in mind it's the edge of the countryside and it's going to affect the
Yeah, we've got an answer for you, John. We've got an answer.
Answer coming?
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, so as per, I think it's in my report, so 3.2 of my report, basically we'd expect 91 of the dwellings, which is the remaining amount, to come forward in phase 2D. Obviously, we have no specifics on how that will look at the minute, because that will come forward in a separate application, which obviously members will be considering when that comes in.
And the density of it is?
I couldn't tell you the density at the minute.
You know how many hectares it is, surely? It's X minus what we
I would have to, yeah, I'd have to kind of measure it up.
You see my point, Chair, that the
Yes,
the vulnerable constraints are going to be reached in 2D, and we're going to, the
I think what...
Gemma. Yeah, but Gemma, do you want to come in?
Yeah, so I don't have the measurement of the area of land, but I have been looking at the Chiltern Lees development brief, and that does expect a lower density towards the bottom of the site. So this is the high density cluster through the centre. As we come further south, it releases again. So it's a bit like round the edges, and to the bottom we would have a lower density. So that is expected in the development brief, and appears to me what has been followed through with the various planning applications we've seen.
Okay. Councillor Manson.
Well, on the comment of the density of phase 2D, it's a very difficult question to answer because some of that space is to be sports grounds. So even if you've got the total area, the density of the actual housing bit could vary depending on how much land is given to the sports facilities.
Yeah, good point.
But we don't want to forget that we do need a few more one-bedroom properties in there, despite the fact it's lower density, which seems to be a little bit at odds.
Okay, so we're going to go to the vote now.
Are there any more,
well, that's what I was going to say.
conditions
Unless
that
there
anyone
anything
else can think of?
Anyone wants to chuck in? Yes, Councillor Passmore.
It's not about adding anything. I just think we need to think about this very carefully, because bearing in mind I don't think either ward member objected to this, and according to the papers here, there's no comment from the Town Council and Stowmarket, and One House Parish Council there, concern we've dealt with. So I do think we need to think carefully about this, whatever our views.
I agree, and I think the other thing we just got to think about is if we go down a route of refusal, what are the grounds? Basically, we're only thinking about appearance, scale, landscape and layout. So that's what I'll just put out there for the last time. But we'll go to the vote. It's been proposed by Councillor Passmore, seconded by Councillor Field, with the additional points that we've covered off. Over to you.
Very happy to, thank you, Chair. Yep, so we're looking at the recommendation as page 37 to 38 of the report, with additional conditions as page 3 to 4 of the table papers, and additional conditions which are EV parking condition to include scheme for ducting to all parking courts, so each dwelling has access to one EV point, details of permeable driveways to be agreed, sustainability scheme to include PV provision throughout, and that's to be agreed, biodiversity enhancement scheme to be submitted, and the ecological conditions as required by our consultee, an ecologically sensitive lighting scheme, early planting of landscaping scheme, and the informative note to expect that the scheme will be built to 2023 building reg specifications. So.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 6 votes for and 1 against. It's carried.
Could I just read something to you before we start? Before we just finish, just to make ourselves a little more happy. It says, this is something from a government thing, from the Department of Levelling Up and all the rest of it. And it says that the new building regs do not apply to any building which has where initial notice or full plans have been deposited with the local authority in respect to that building before 5th of June 2022. And we are before the 5th of June 2022, providing that the building work on that building is started before the 15th of June 2023. So I suppose that makes me more happy that the new regs will apply unless they get them built before 2023. Started. Which I suppose means digging a hole somewhere.
Well, members, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is site inspections. We do have one to report taking place.
Yes, there's a site inspection on Monday.
Yeah.
And all details
and members have been sent all the details, so look forward to seeing you then. Okay, so we've formally closed the meeting at 11:24. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.